Hey everyone, October just keeps rolling along, and here at Never Enough Gaming, we've been traveling through the realm of Halloween themed games. These gems will help you spooky up your October. Today I thought we'd do something different, something a little bit fun. What do you like to do when you're preparing for Halloween?
I like to get a little pumpkin spicy, get my latte on, a nice pumpkin spice scone with some apple butter on the side.
Oh, that sounds delicious. But I had something else a little bit spookier in mind. I thought we would investigate a haunted house.
Because that always ends well. We learned that from the movies.
Oh, but of course that doesn't apply to us. We'll do it correctly. Well, hopefully there isn't a traitor among us. I'm Jeremy. This is Elaine, and today we're going to be taking our chances investigating this haunted house because we're reviewing Betrayal at House on the Hill. Okay, so let's discuss a little bit about the basics of Betrayal at House on the Hill. You start out playing one of these characters. There's some different ones. These are double-sided, so you can have different characters. And they each have different abilities, kind of. Well, they're all the same abilities, but they have different numbers and values for those abilities. So you have speed, might, sanity, and knowledge. And you kind of track your score with this little plastic thing that goes up and down, which is kind of makes it easy to track where you are. Um, you're basically investigating a haunted house. You kind of start on this. This is your entrance hall. Everybody starts there. You come in through the little door, and you build off of these via these tiles. Tiles have the doors attached to them, and you kind of build the map as you're going along. This is kind of a cool mechanic that a few games pull out, and it allows you to have some customizability with the games that you're playing. The twist to this one is it's got a traitor mechanic, which some people might be familiar with from like Shadows over Camelot or something like that. But in most of the other traitor mechanic kind of games, you know ahead of time who the traitor is. Like right from your roll cards, you know who the traitor might be. But in this one, the difference is it's hidden from even the person who's playing the traitor. You don't know what's going to happen until you draw these cards, these omen cards, prompted by the spaces you land on the board, and you have to do a haunt roll. And if the number that you roll is lower than the amount of haunt cards, omen cards sitting in the pile, then the traitor's revealed, and you have to go through a table that kind of shows you how to determine who's the traitor and what specific traitor they are, like what type of haunt they are representing. Then the cool thing is everybody gets their own book. This is the traitor book. They got to go in the other room and read through it, figure out what their specific haunt is. There's all story and lore behind it. And then while they leave and banish themselves to the other room to read their haunt, the survivors, the rest of the people, have to figure out how to combat that specific haunt. Like there might be some kind of a item that they have to collect or a specific room that they have to find to perform a ritual in or something like that. I'm not really going to delve into the specifics of the haunts because that kind of takes the fun out of it. But there's some, each one's different, and each specific haunt has a specific thing that you have to do, and depending on how it comes out in the game, it can be easier or harder to accomplish. That's pretty much the basis behind it. You have different event cards that you have to do. You have items that you can collect, and you kind of build that board out as you go along. All of the tiles kind of show you where in the house you're allowed to have them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of talk about our thoughts, some pros and cons behind this game, and kind of determine if it's the right game for you. Okay, so what are some of your cons for Betrayal?
First of all, there are 12 different characters to play with because those little marker things are double-sided. But there are only 6 figurines, so some of the figurines don't really look like your character. I think it's the most noticeable with this little professor kind of guy over here, simply because there is a version of him that has a beard, and this guy clearly does not have one. So there's that. The markers on the cards, well, they're handy and they're kind of thematic because they look a little bit like a traditional coffin. They slide around really, really easily if you just nudge them. I mean, obviously we're holding it up right now, but if you just nudge it on the table, it's going to come off, it's going to move, it's going to shift, and Lord knows if you're going to remember what the heck your point value was at that point. So that's a problem. And then, like, I honestly just do not find these figures attractive. A lot of them have kind of like sloppy paint jobs. They're done for you, which is kind of nice because it can be hard for some people to paint them. But, you know, just like, look how his book's a little messed up. His face is a little wonky. Just not cute as far as the figurines are concerned. I feel like this game, more than a lot of other games, feels like it's very skewed in someone's favor. Like, if the haunt happens really, really early, it's hard for the survivors to win this game. If the haunt happens late in the game, there's a lot of, you know, the mansion has been filled out a lot. It's really hard for the traitor to win. It's usually you have to find a room, you have to find an item, and 9 times out of 10 you've already done that or done most of it. So there isn't much left for the non-traitor characters to do. And then the traitor loses, and it can feel a little bit like you're getting ganged up on. A little bit.
I mean, I feel like the ganging up on is kind of part of the point of the game, but the issue with what you were talking about is, like, the last time that I played this game all the way through with a group, we had discovered basically the entire mansion by the time the haunt happened, and we had to gather items in order to get to a specific room to do these rituals, and we already had 3 players in the rooms that we needed to be in with the items that they needed. So the haunt only lasted about 2 rounds before we were able to beat the traitor. And he doesn't, because the traitor doesn't know what you have to do. There's not really any way to make an educated guess on stopping the players unless they're versed in the game. And at that point, it's not even like you're kind of taking all the fun out of it. The other way around, if the haunt happens early, like you were saying, you don't know where any of the rooms are. You have to still do a lot of discovery. You still have to draw a lot of event cards as you reveal different rooms, and the traitor can just kind of set up where they need to be set up, and you're kind of fighting against the game and you're fighting against the traitor, and it's really hard for the survivors to win. There's a good balance in the middle. Like if it's around halfway through your revealing of the mansion, maybe you revealed like a full floor, but not fully the basement, or you've revealed the main floor, you haven't revealed the top floor, and you're just kind of starting to venture into the basement or something like that. Maybe you find a good balance, and I feel like it falls in there more often than not just by chance. But there's a good shot because it's based on luck when the haunt happens that you're going to end up in the beginning or the end, which kind of skews it one way or the other. In terms of the other cons, yeah, I definitely agree with you on the paint jobs on these things. And some of the sculpting work is not great. Like this little girl looks like a cat person because her face is so distorted. But it's kind of weird looking. But and the paint is not great. You were showing the example here where his like book or briefcase, I think it's a book, is like covered up by the paint that was put on his lab coat, so it's like half white. That's just, I'd rather them not paint it, honestly, because then you can have people paint it for you, or if you're good, you can paint it yourself. But this is kind of wonky. And if you're gonna have 12 characters, I don't understand why you don't have 12 figurines. I know, honestly, it makes the game cheaper. It's cheaper to put out a game that has less figurines because figurines are expensive. But this is a pretty pricey game. When it's at full price, it's up there. So you can throw in the extra 6 figurines so we can play as all of the players. All right, so that's enough ripping on the game. What's some pros for Betrayal?
I think it's a good length. I would say on average it's the 45-minute length, which for the most part isn't too long if you decide to sit down as a group and play a game of a decent length, more or less. And it's not too short. It's not like, 20 minutes. Oh, I beat this game. Whoop-de-doo. So that's good. Definitely like that. I like that there are 50 different, scenarios. There's a lot of replayability because there are so many scenarios. But at the same time, some of them are better than others. I think that's just natural. You're going to like certain things more than other things. Mm-hmm. And some of them have more complex rules, which makes it a little difficult because sometimes maybe you want to bring in a newer player or someone who doesn't have as much experience, and maybe they wind up being the traitor, and they have these really complex, rules, and they don't really know what they're doing because they have a basic understanding of the game. And it gets a little messy because you never know what scenario you're going to have
Yeah.
ahead of time. There's no way to really plan ahead. It's like, well, you this time, Jeremy, are going to be the traitor. We're going to try to murder you before you murder us. Because that seems like a good idea. It just does not work like that. And that's a little problematic for some gameplay. And I do like that, there's a tile laying mechanic. Like, this board is not static. It always looks different. Sometimes this makes it a little difficult to play on certain types of tables. This game isn't overly large. It's not like Eldritch Horror large, I would say.
We'll be talking about that later in October.
But it is large enough where you need, a decent sized table. If you have a smaller table, a smaller house, it might not work out too well, depending on how it lays out ultimately. If you have a more compact setup, then it should be fine. If you have one of those ones where it's like one room here and then like one room here and then it goes like over there and then down there, and you're going to take up your whole table.
The gaming table that like I usually play on, and we usually play on a lot of the time, is a pretty large table, and we've had games that run over the side, and that's annoying because then you got to move it to the side, and you'd be like, well, if you go out through this door, then you pop out over here, and there's not really any way to avoid that unless you're going to have tiles that are specifically like it can only go a certain distance, or like this is an outside wall tile and it can like they're like you're guaranteed to hit those after a certain thing, but there's really not any way to fix that. The table space, I think, is something that a lot of games don't take into account most of the time. In terms of the prepping, like when you send that new player, you're playing for the first time. The first time I ever played this game, I ended up being the traitor, and I had to go into the other room, and I was at my friend's house. And I was reading through this. I found my scenario, and I'm like, ooh, how do I do that? And I figured it out as I went along. I ended up winning that game, but and it was actually fun. I had a good haunt that I enjoyed. But you're kind of almost teaching the player new mechanics, like that aren't kind of part of the game. Like there's things that they can do, and it's not like they can ask, oh, how do I do this? Because then you're kind of revealing what you can do. And if the players figure out what you can do really early by basically you telling them, you're probably not going to win, because like the secret aspect of it is kind of the biggest thing in its favor on either side that gives either side the advantage. And like you were saying, the fact that there are a lot of them is really good, and you can end up with like it's going to take a while for any gaming group to go through all of those scenarios, but you can hit the same. Like I haven't played this game more than double digits, but we've already hit the same scenario more than once, so it can happen. Even though I haven't played it even nearly 50 times. So it will happen, and then once your gaming group kind of knows those scenarios, you kind of have to either randomly pick a different one or something like that, so you're not playing the same ones over and over again. In terms of something that I just kind of thought of is like I wish there was a way to play with less than the 3 people. It's a 3 to 6 player game, which I think is it's a pro that you can play with 6 people. A lot of games you can't really go beyond 4. Most of them are scaled to 4, and if they allow you to go beyond 4, it drags the game to the point where you can't even play it. 4 is kind of the sweet spot in most games, but this one, because your turn's not like something that lasts a long time, you can play with the maximum of 6 people, and it's fine. It doesn't drag. It doesn't make the game take like a really long time. But I kind of wish there was a way to play with less than 3 people, because sometimes you just want to play like with a close friend or a partner or like a child or something. You want to play with them, and there's no kind of way for you to play against the game. And I feel like this is a game that could easily have something like that. Just based on the haunts that I've seen, you can easily have something where it's rolled by dice, or something randomly happens, and that's something that could be added into the game easily. So in terms of recommending this game to people, What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a good game overall. I mean, it's not the best, and a lot of it just comes down to components that could use some work. I know we mentioned these little guys and their poor paint job, and then the markers. But I mean, the cards are it's very tall, awkward shape. They're a little flimsy. They're not terrible. Like I've seen worse cards than this, but they're a little flimsy. But then you have these nice cardboard things, which probably aren't gonna get messed up anytime soon. Um, and to be honest, some of the haunts are just they're really bad. They're really bad. I'm sorry, and some of them are really good. So overall, I'd say this is a better than average game, but I can't really rate it more than a 7. I think it's fair, just because of poor parts and a few just really not so great haunts.
Yeah, I'd probably be right along the same thought pattern as you. I will say, like you were talking about the cards, and I was trying to show it there while you were kind of saying every single card in my game is bent. Like I have kind of some cards laying out here, and they're all bent. And the issue that comes from them just being kind of an unwieldy shape, and it's kind of they don't fit in the box very well, um, and you just I don't it bothers me to lay them out on the table and all of the decks be bent. But the tiles are great; they're in great shape. They come out; they're easy to remove from the initial sheets because you usually have to pop them out. They're easy to remove where you don't end up with those little tag things that end up ripping a lot of the tiles. I can't even count how many times that I've pulled coins out or tokens or something like that out of a game, and they just rip immediately because you're pulling them out and they're attached at the little like those little tick points. But these like they have a lot of tiles that come with the game, and I didn't have an issue with any of them. So it's held up well. The board's held up well. There is that disparity between kind of the good haunts and the bad haunts. Some of the bad haunts are basically where you could have it as a co-op mode where it's the game's just doing it itself because there's an obvious choice that the trader has to make where if he makes any other choice they're just going to lose, so it's kind of like, well, I know exactly what I have to do, there's not really any choice in the matter, so it's kind of mechanical on some of them. But then there's other ones that have a lot of choice and you can use a lot of tactics. My recommendation is if you have a gaming group that is typically 5 or 6 players, this is a game that would probably be worth picking up. It's a little bit on the pricey side, but there's not a lot of games that you can play with 5 or 6 or 7 people. This one doesn't go to 7, but going to just to 6 is already kind of a rarity. So if you have a group that has that many people on a regular basis, like I've been in groups that have that many people, and finding games is kind of hard sometimes, this is a good one to pick up. And if you have a group that just loves having fun and is not like ultra competitive, this is not a game where you can be really ultra competitive at. It's a game you have to have fun. The flavor text is fun. Like you can read all these things about the items and the different omens and things like that. You kind of got to get into the spooky investigating a haunted house kind of a feel. So I'd rate it about a 7.5. It's a fun game. I think you should give it a shot. We're gonna have some links in the description down below where you can find out where you can get this game, and no extra cost to you, but it helps out the channel. And so this is Elaine, and I'm Jeremy. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Never Enough Gaming, and we'll see you in the next one.